Hello everyone, welcome to Tactica Imperialis and to today's video. Today is the start of a brand new Age of Sigmar hobby project. As I mentioned in my video last week, I am returning to a project 3 years in the making. An Aelfen Adventure, Season 2, Electric Boogaloo, now in stores. Yes, that's a TTS joke, I'm not ashamed of it. Anyway, so 3 years ago, when I started university, I did a little hobby project that I called an Aelfen Adventure, a pun so good and yet so bad that I kind of love and hate it at the same time. And it was a mix of dark elves, because that was the stuff I picked up just as Age of Sigmar came out. This was in the time before AOS 1 really had anything, so there were no points, no real balancing mechanics, and also no General's Handbook, so the factions hadn't been chopped up yet. So I got a little bit of a mix of stuff, some Darkling Covens they would become, some Shadowblades, some Scourge Privateers, some Orders of Pentis, and some Daughters of Khaine. A real wide mix of stuff, if I do say so myself. Probably, if I put it all on the table, I could probably get to like 3,000 points if I put it all together. Maybe, I don't know, I haven't done the maths. Anyway, so I did that project for about a semester. But then I got distracted. I did some 40k, I did some more 40k, and then I did my Stormcast in a town called Malice, which is my previous hobby project. I'll put it in the description below if you want to get an idea of the format of how these things usually go, if you don't want to sit through this one, which I still think you should sit through this one, because I think it's quite fun. But I never got around to doing an Aelfen Adventure, but I always said to myself at the time and during the last 3 years, I'm going to redo Aelfen Adventure. I want to go back and do those things again. And when Daughters of Khaine came out in March, the Battle Tome for Daughters of Khaine, I thought, well, this is my moment. So I wrapped up a town called Malice. I finished off my Stormcast. I got Soul Wars. Brought the army up to 5,000 or 6,000 points, whatever it is. A nice solid year's work, I will say. And now, as the new academic year gets started, I'm going to go back to my elves, restart an Aelfen Adventure, and the first army that we're going to be working on, or at least the primary army for the series, is going to be the Daughters of Khaine. They have the actual battle tome, so they're the most usable frontline army, and will be the bulk of the stuff you're going to see in the series, especially early on. So, what I wanted to do with this series is sort of what I've done before. Talk about paint schemes and all the things that entails, and maybe talk a bit about technicals with kits and how they go together and all of that sort of thing. And I also want to use it as a sort of tactics discussion segment. So each time we show off a new unit or a new variant on a unit, I'll be talking about its abilities, how it works on the tabletop, why I built X configuration over Y, how I'm intending to get the most out of them, where they fit into the army, those sorts of things. Nice, rounded mix of stuff, just so that you get an idea of not just what I'm putting into the army, but why I'm putting it in outside of it looks cool, I want it. I think that's just something that's really useful to do with projects like this, is to justify yourself, to explain, I'm doing this, but when I take it to the tabletop, this is what that's going to do. Or if I created a display board, this is what that's going to do. I just like having context. Maybe that's just me. Let me know if you disagree with that. So today, the first episode, I am going to be showing off the new paint scheme for the army, because those who remember back 3 years ago know that my old paint scheme was utterly terrible, and my painting was also utterly terrible. I'm not going to say it's exactly Golden Demon levels these days, but it is an improvement, I'll say that at least. We're also going to be showing off the basing scheme for the army, because I've got a couple of models based, I've had a tinker with that, and I know what I'm going to be doing. So we'll be able to talk about a little bit of tactical stuff with the units that are shown off today. So I'm going to be showing off the battle line, and we're also going to have a bit of a hero discussion. Not a full hero discussion, but at least a little bit. So that's broadly everything that I think I need to say. But I should also point out that whilst the Daughters of Khaine form the bulk of this project, they're not going to be the only ones. I have sat down outside my desk a Malekith model. Yes, I bought the made-to-order Malekith when it went on made-to-order. I'm a little bit sad, I know. I kind of wanted to use mother and son on the same battlefield, and since we don't know when we're going to get Malarian, this seemed like the best way to do it. So what that means is I will be working on my Orders of Pentis collection, as well as, if I want to, my Darkling Covens. I'll address them when I get to them. Suffice it to say the Daughters of Khaine will take up the majority. So the series is going to be running bi-weekly. Every 2 weeks you're going to get an episode, mainly because that is a nice balance between actually having a regular schedule and having time to get the models done and do a degree, because I'm in my final year now and I'm flipping busy. My timetable is nuts. But we will get into the particulars of the army and how they work a little bit later. For now, let's get started with the paint scheme and have a good little discussion about battle line choices. We'll get on to heroes as well today. So, with all that said, let's get started. This is an Aelfen Adventure Season 2, Episode 1. I've been waiting 3 years to do this, and I'm really, really excited, and I hope you are too. Let's go. Right then, say hello to the new paint scheme of the Aelfen Adventure collection. Starting off with 10 Witch Elves, the basic unit of Daughters of Khaine. So the paint scheme itself is an improvement, and actually it follows the battle tome pretty much to the letter, at least in terms of the bit that matters. So I'll use the hero at the front here, the Hag, as the demonstration. So the skin is pallid witch flesh, with a wash of Reichland flesh shade, highlighted again with pallid witch flesh. You can, according to the battle tome, do ceramite white, sort of as a final highlight, mainly to pick out the eyes and things like that. I haven't done that, and I'm aware that it does look very, very bright on the camera, almost super white. It's not quite that white when I'm looking at them in person, but I can see why you might think that. But you can tell with the hair just what actual white is supposed to look like. The reason I've done that is because basically I followed the battle tome because I'm not very good at painting flesh. This project partly is me learning how to paint flesh and not be terrible at it. You'll see possibly in some models, I think I've got one where I show off the basing scheme, just what my old paint scheme used to look like for skin, and it was terrible. I'm not going to sit here and tell you this is absolutely world-class painting in terms of how you should paint flesh, but it is definitely, for me, a vast improvement on what came before. As for the rest of the model, the hair is probably the next most interesting piece. Again, I don't know how well this is going to show up on the final recording, but the hair is actually washed with not black. So it's a Celestra Grey, or Astronomican as I still use, base coat, then washed with what has basically become my new best friend in terms of paints over the past year or so. And that, as soon as I find it in my collection, is... Nope, where is it? Oh, it's you. Coelia Green Shade, aka my new best friend. This paint is amazing, and I use it quite a lot, and you'll see more of it later in the project with some units, I don't doubt. So the hair is Celestra Grey washed with Coelia Green Shade, and then highlighted with Celestra Grey and then Ceramite White to finish. Oh, and those of you who criticize me for my painting can also know I did an undercoat this time, guys. I actually undercoated the skin in white so it wasn't just painted straight onto the grey. That took a while, but I did actually do an undercoat. So long-time viewers who critique my not using an undercoat, well, I actually did an undercoat this time. So that's the hair. It's not the most in-depth layering you'll ever see on hair, but you can see the sort of the white highlights that are reserved for the upper edges, and you still see the grey and the wash underneath. So you sort of have got a few layers built up. The gold is in the same way as for my Stormcast Eternals, which is Retributor Armor washed with Caribou Crimson and then highlighted with Auric Armor Gold. One of the best ways to show that off is probably on one of these shields. Camera, help me out here. Okay, the camera's not working for me. Is on the shield. You can see there, that's the sort of effect you get. I love using Caribou Crimson to wash gold. It's brilliant. Also, I'm aware that that's a little bit messy. I'll probably go and tidy that up before I put these guys on the table. The silver is very simple. It's just Leadbelcher, Nuln Oil, highlight with Ironbreaker. Nice and simple. The red is Corn Red, Nuln Oil, and then Mephiston Red as a highlight. And then there's bits of brown, which are done in Doomball Brown. And then purple, oh, hang on, camera zoomed out again. And then the purple is done with Nagaroth Night. I actually bought a new purple. When did I buy Nagaroth Night? I think I bought it during the summer. I bought Nagaroth Night, which is a much darker purple, which I now use as my base coat, and then I highlight it if I choose to with Zarus Purple, which is the old Lich Purple for those who still speak old Citadel paints. Other than that, the rocks are just Mechanica Standard Grey and a Null Oil Wash. I could put some Agrax Earthshade over those if I need to add some extra dimensions. And I know that there's bits on bobs on them you can do, such as like little bits of helmets and runes. But I'm not super fussed about the bases until I've done the base sing, which I'll get onto later in this video. So, that's the paint scheme broadly. There are some other elements for other models that will come up, but we'll get to those when we get to the relevant models, because this basic scheme will not be enough when it comes to painting snakes and harpies and other demon monster things, so we'll get to that in due course. Now, why Witch Elves? Because Daughters of Khaine actually changed quite fundamentally when they got their battle tome, in that Sisters of Slaughter became battle line along with Witch Elves. Both of them are pure battle line. They're not battle line if, they're pure battle line. So the question becomes, which one should you take? Which one should you build? And how do you go about doing it? For Witch Elves, you pay 100 points. For Sisters of Slaughter, you pay 120. They both have a move of 6, 1 wound, a 6-up save, and bravery of 7, and get 2 attacks that have hitting on 3s, wounding on 4s, no rend, and damage 1. However, the Sisters of Slaughter, when they have their attacks, do get an extra inch of range. So if you're going for large units, and I'm talking the full-size horde of 30, you might want to consider Sisters of Slaughter. Both their champions get +1 to hit, both have hornblowers that allow them to run and charge, and both can take standard bearers that allow them to roll 2 dice instead of 1 and keep the lowest when taking a battle shock test. I don't have a standard bearer here to show off because I already have 3 standard bearers, so I can already make 3 units of 10 with banners. I'm sure when I repaint those models, I'll show them off in the project, just so you can see how they look. In terms of their other abilities, Witch Elves can have 2 knives instead of 1, as can the Sisters of Slaughter. They can get a knife as well as their whip attack, and that gives them an extra 3s, 4s, no rend, damage 1 attack. Their alternate is to take a shield, which is the Bladed Buckler. This gives them a 5+ save in the combat phase, and if you roll an unmodified 6, so after rerolls before modifiers, a 6, then you do a mortal wound back to the attacking unit. So you give up an attack for the chance of, well, 1, having a save, and 2, doing some mortal wounds to your enemy when they attack you. Sisters of Slaughter and Witch Elves can both have both these options, but Witch Elves get an extra ability. If they are within 8 inches of a Daughters of Khaine hero in the combat phase, so that's Hag Queens, Slaughter Queens, Bloodrak Medusae, and Morathi, and Bloodrak Shrines and Cauldrons of Blood, of course, then they get +1 attack again, meaning that they get 4 attacks if they use both knives, or 3 attacks if they go knife and shield. And that's really, really good. So they're cheaper, and they have technically more damage output per model, assuming that you arm them identically, i.e. weapon plus knife or weapon plus shield. They have this more damage output than Sisters of Slaughter, but Sisters of Slaughter get additional pile-in and can get chosen to pile in from further away. So that sort of reinforces what I said earlier. If you're taking a unit of 30, which is a full-size horde, both units actually get cheaper in hordes, by the way. Sisters of Slaughter go down to 300 for 30, and Witch Elves to 270, so instead of paying 12 or 10, you pay 10 and 9, which is a nice little bonus. But beyond that, they're pretty similar, and I think Witch Elves generally are the better pick. Also, they're easier to keep within coherency because the whips don't go out all over the place. The question then becomes, well, what do you arm your Witch Elves with? Do you go shields or do you go knives? And you may have already noticed that this unit has a mix. If you did, gold star. This technically isn't allowed in this size anyway, because you take units in the size of 10s, so you can't have them in 5s, fit them in 10s, and they have to be armed identically. The reason that I've got 5 shields and 5 knives, if you count them up, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shields and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 no shields, is because back in my old days of an Aelfen Adventure 3 years ago, you could take Witch Elves back in units of 5, so I had 5 with shields and 15 without. So I couldn't actually make that unit of 5 shields into a unit, so I built 5 more shields so that I have 10 shields and 20 knives. That's why that is, in case you were wondering. In terms of which I think is better, it depends, because 4 attacks each is a lot for basic battle line infantry, especially when you count up the rerolls that they can get as part of their allegiance ability once they get to turn 3. and turn 4, and then turn 5 is Battle Shock, I think. So they really can get a lot of damage in. However, I do quite like the shields aesthetically, and the extra save that they get stacks very nicely with some other abilities. For example, the Cauldron of Blood. This is, well, it was the centerpiece model of the Daughters of Khaine, and it used to give them the 6+ save after a save that is now their Fanatical Faith Allegiance ability. So what it does now is give them an aura of old school Mystic Shield, i.e. +1 save. That means that Witch Elves with shields have a 4-up save in the combat phase. 4 up! That's Stormcast level armor. That's actually quite good. And while they don't get the rerolls of 1 to save like Stormcast do, they do get the chance to do mortal wounds. So having a unit of 10 with shields that can be, for want of a better word, cauldron guards, or can sit around at the back and hold an objective with a little bit more defense should an opponent come charging at them, or that can be used as, well, I don't like to use the word tar pit, but a tar pit for Daughters of Khaine, just to stall a unit a little bit with an extra point of save, maybe deal a bit of damage to high save characters with their mortal wounds. That's what I really want that 10-girl unit to be, and you'll see that, I'm sure, as the games go on. So that is the first unit, an introduction to the paint scheme, as well as a little bit of discussion about battle line. You'll know now, if you were around for 3 years, but as I've already sort of mentioned, I have 30 actual Witch Elves, but no Sisters of Slaughter. I'm not planning to get Sisters of Slaughter, because I'd have to buy 3 boxes of them for me to make them worthwhile, and I think 30 Witch Elves will do a lot more for me than 30 Sisters of Slaughter, because I have to hoard up the Sisters of Slaughter, so there you go. If you think I really should get Sisters of Slaughter, let me know in the comments, justify it to me, and I'll give it some thought as to maybe why I can run them in 10s, but when I have Witch Elves that are cheaper and do more damage, then I'm inclined to disagree. Anyway, that's just my opinion, so let's move on now, and I want to talk about the basing scheme, as well as talk a little bit about heroes, because, well, one of the models I've rebased is a hero, and it seems a good time to have the discussion. Alright, so the second model I wanted, well, unit I wanted to really show off and talk about today is this one. This is a Hag Queen. Formerly, you might have recognized this as a Death Hag, because that's what it used to be called, but it's now called a Hag Queen, because she's the one with the Witch Brew. The one at the back right is a Slaughter Queen. Formerly, that was Hellebron, back when she was a thing. And I haven't fully repainted her. I'm still sort of working on that. So I might have done a bit to the hair and I might have done a bit to the skin. But I could do with fully restarting her as opposed to a sort of fixing the problem job, which is sort of what I've done on the Hag Queen. Because the Hag Queen's got a lot more exposed everything. It's a much more open model. There's a lot of stuff blocking other stuff. So I was actually able to repaint her a little more easily, get access to all the armor, all the flesh, and to the robes as well. So I'm not going to talk about her for much because her painting is pretty much exactly the same as the Witch Elves, but you might notice her hair's a slightly different tint. The reason for that is because the underwash for her hair is Carroburg Crimson, as opposed to Coelia Green shade. I sort of like the idea that they've bathed in blood. In fact, that is one of the command traits you can literally give them, is called Bathed in Blood, and it's sort of soaked into her hair, almost like a dye. So I kind of like that. So that's what I'm done with the Hag Queen's hair, as opposed to the Coelia I've done with the Witch Elves, and will do with all the other hair of the stuff in the army. But the main thing I wanted to show off here is the basing scheme, because yes, I've actually done a basing scheme early on in the project, and that's why I've got this model here as well. This is what I used to paint like. This is my old Witch Elves. Yeah, they don't look great, do they? They don't really look all that great. I mean, they're neat, but they're not great. So the basing scheme is as follows. It's quite a simple one, as before. Because you remember with my Stormcast Eternals, I did a 2-stage basing, which was Martian Iron Crust or Martian Iron Earth, one of the two, the thick one, washed down with Carroburg Crimson. This time, I have got Astro Granite, the thin variant of Astro Granite, which is going to create this sort of dusty effect, a sort of rocky, dusty, shadowy effect. And then I washed that with Nuln Oil and highlighted it with Celestra Grey, a nice soft dry brush of Celestra Grey, just to create the feel that it's not just a grey waste. There's actually some texture to it, just add a little bit of extra depth to it. And the reason I've gone for that is because this is an army that, first and foremost, hails from Ulgu. Ulgu, the Shadowlands, the Realm of Shadow, the 13 realms, 13 dimensions. I can't remember 13 kingdoms. Goodness me, I can't remember all of the names that Ulgu has, but it is the home of Marathi, Malerian, the Daughters of Khaine as a whole. It's their home, and so I wanted the army to reflect that. Obviously, there are cults and temples spread all over the place now across the mortal realms. Some live in the free cities, some just live out on their own in their own little isolated areas. Some do stay in Ulgu, but the Shadowlands are the home of the Daughters of Khaine. And so when I use the army with malign sorcery relics in terms of where they're from and that sort of thing, I probably will use Shadow just because I find it thematic. It might not be the most powerful option for them, but I do like them to come from the realm of Shadow. It just suits them to my mind. So I wanted to go for a sort of dark, shadowy realm where there wasn't much color. It was lots of grey, and it was kind of unclear what anything was. Obviously, shadowy mists on the ground was never really going to be something I could do realistically, but the sort of texture of the earth, it's not too rocky, it's just nice and flat and open, but also cloaked in darkness, and the white dry brush might represent the fact that there's bits of mist trailing along the floor, and it just adds to the ethereal idea. And also for the aesthetic thing, it also clashes quite nicely with the colours. So your eyes are not drawn down to the base immediately, they're drawn to the brighter colours, the flesh, the hair. They're the striking colours of the army, and then you look down and you can see the base as well. It doesn't detract, it just adds a little extra dimension, which is something that basing should always do. It shouldn't be the centerpiece, it should just be an extra layer of dimension, at least to my mind. Now, let's have a little talk, shall we, while we're here, about heroes. Because Daughters of Khaine have got 3 or 4 of them, although those 3 or 4, most of them have alternate forms and mounts and things like that. So you have the Hag Queen, the Slaughter Queen, the Blood Rat Medusa, and of course Marathi herself, though all of the not Marathi variants can be mounted up onto either a Cauldron of Blood in the former 2 cases, or a Blood Rat Shrine in the case of the Medusa. The Hag Queen is the cheapest in the foot-mounted variant. She's 60 points, whereas the Slaughter Queen is 100. The reason for that is quite simple. The Slaughter Queen has an extra damage D3 weapon, so has 3 damage D3 attacks on top of the 4 rending attacks that both of them have. She also has an additional prayer because they are priests, and she also has the ability to unbind, and she has a command ability. Admittedly, as if this model is your general command ability, but it's a command ability, so you get a lot for 40 points. But what you lose is this thing that's in the Hag Queen's left hand, Witch Brew. So Witch Brew gives a friendly Daughters of Khaine unit within 3 inches the ability to reroll to wound for their melee weapons and ignore battle shock. On Witch Elves, this is an absolute godsend. It is really, I can't state the value of Witch Brew enough on Witch Elves. It makes them so much more reliable because wounding on 4s isn't great, and hitting on 3s, you get a lot of hits, you don't necessarily get the wounds. As for the Slaughter Queen, her command ability allows a unit within 14 inches to pile in and attack if they are within 3 inches of an enemy unit already. So they get to attack in the hero phase as well as the combat phase, which is pretty nice. It's a nice one to have, giving a unit basically 2 rounds of attacks. In terms for their prayers, both of them carry the Rune of Khaine prayer, which allows them to up the damage of their 4 attack weapon, the small sword, from 1 to D3, which means that a Slaughter Queen can have 7 damage D3 attacks. Yeah, that's a lot. They both have Touch of Death, which allows them to basically 50-50 do D3 mortal wounds to a unit within 3 inches. You basically hold a dice out in one hand and your opponent has to guess which hand it's in. It's a little bit weird, rather than just on a 4+, which is basically what it is, it's 50-50. But the Slaughter Queen also has a prayer that allows her to pile in and attack twice in the combat phase. They only have the ability to pray once, and it only happens on a 3+, and on a 1 they take a mortal wound, so it's not perfect. They're both move 6 with 5 wounds, a 5-up save, and a bravery of 8, which is pretty good. Actually, the Slaughter Queen's bravery 9, I missed that, sorry. And they're pretty useful and cheap, but their value comes when you mount them up. A Hag Queen can go on a Cauldron of Blood, as can a Slaughter Queen, both costing about 200 points more. Or 250 nearly. A Hag Queen is 300 on a Cauldron, a Slaughter Queen is 330. At this point, they don't really lose anything. The only thing that you might lose is the Dance of Doom prayer for the Slaughter Queen, so a Cauldron of Blood can't be chosen to pile in an attack twice. Sorry. They do gain additional prayer because they have an avatar in the army now, because there is an avatar of Khaine sat on the Cauldron of Blood that can be animated, which is pretty useful because it's got a really nice shooting attack and 4 damage 3 attacks in melee if it is active. They also gain another 7 wounds, although they do lose a bit of movement as the game goes on. And generally, they just get more damage. So they get a bladed impact, they get a do damage on a charge, d3 mortal wounds on a 2+, nice. The Cauldron of Blood's Blood Shield ability, giving +1 save for Daughters of Khaine units wholly within initially 18 inches, although it does fall off. So that's very, very useful, which is basically gives the Cauldron a 4+ save, and yeah, it's just really, really useful. The Hag Queen still gets her Witch Brew. The Slaughter Queen still gets Orgy of Slaughter, which is the same command ability. And all units within 7 inches of the model, basically because there's an avatar, also get +1 bravery, which is very good when you combo it with things like Mind Razor, which is a very, very useful spell that I'll get to when I talk about the magic users. I'm not going to talk about the Blood Rat Medusa today. I'm not going to talk about magic today. I'll do that another time. Other than that, you don't actually get any new bonuses. You just get a bunch more attacks and the avatar's abilities and the Blood Shield and the Bladed Impact, and the Slaughter Queen can still unbind. So, okay, you do get a lot, but it's very, very good. The challenge comes in deciding which one you're going to mount up, if any, because generally you'll have both these models in your army, but you'll only have one Cauldron. For me, I quite like to mount up the Slaughter Queen, because generally her staying alive is more important. She's going to be your general more often than a Hag Queen is, because she has a command ability that requires her to be general. So her being general, her staying alive with a 4-up save and 13 wounds is more important than the Hag Queen. However, the power of the Hag Queen is in her Witch Brew, and having a much larger base footprint means it's much easier to give Witch Brew to a unit. It doesn't really matter other than that, which unit you mount up other than the cost, but it is actually cheaper to do Hag Queen on foot, Slaughter Queen up, because that's 390 points, than it is to do Hag Queen up, Slaughter Queen on foot, that's 400. If you want your Slaughter Queen to be a one-woman wrecking crew, I'd advise you actually put her on foot, because she's more maneuverable, and she also has the attack twice prayer available to her. If you really value Witch Brew, do it that way. If you want to do it the other way around, I encourage that as well, because it allows your Hag Queen to stick near your Witch Elves, or whatever unit you want them to buff, a little bit more easily, because that's 3 inches, and the command ability is 14. So there you go. That is all I want to talk about with heroes today. And you'll see as I go throughout the project, I'll be talking about different games that I play. I'm not sure I can do battle reports. I'll see how I go. But as we go through the project, I'll be probably experimenting with Hag Queen up, Slaughter Queen up, and just swapping them in and out on the Cauldron and on foot. I've also got to bear in mind keeping it into points limits, so it may be that I have to take the Blood Rat Medusa up onto the shrine, because that's a lot cheaper to do, assuming you don't take the avatar anyway. So I'll let you know as we go, but let me know again what you think in the comments below. How do you use Hag Queens and Slaughter Queens? Do you mount them up? Do you keep them on foot? Which abilities are more important, and so on and so forth. I have a rough idea and have done some playtesting, but always value extra opinions. Anyway, thank you very much for watching today. This has been the first part of an Aelfen Adventure Season 2, my Age of Sigmar hobby project. Starting us off with the Daughters of Khaine, looking at their new painting scheme and their basing scheme. Next time, I'm thinking, ooh, what do I want to do? Yeah, I think I've talked a little bit about magic today, or I wanted to talk about magic, but didn't. So we'll talk about magic tomorrow. Next time in 2 weeks, sorry. And when we talk about magic, I'll show off the wizard that I have in the army that isn't Marathi, because I'm not going to show you Marathi right away. I'm not quite finished with her. And also, we'll talk about the other snaky things that lie in wait for the Daughters of Khaine. So, we'll get to that very, very soon. Thank you very, very much for watching Tactica Imperialis for the first part of an Aelfen Adventure Season 2. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and at least for this series, I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you all for watching, and goodbye.